Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Painted in Color podcast. I'm Lauren Brown, joined by co-host Mia Araujo, and today we start to have an impromptu conversation that ends up being about boundaries and saying no when you can say no. So let's get into it, shall we? Or two, but some people are too afraid to do that. Like
Yeah.
some people are too afraid to like stand up for themselves around that kind of thing because they're like, I feel too bad, and
Yeah.
then they end up eroding themselves because they feel too bad to leave these kinds of not toxic necessarily, but these things that are not serving them, that are not feeding them.
Yeah.
So it's really important to like be able to set when you can actually do that and say, hey, this is not serving me, I don't need this in my life anymore, we are good to cut this out over here and let it be what it is, and that's fine.
Yeah.
That's self-care.
It is self-care. You're so right. Because anything that is kind of draining you in any way, it means that that's energy of yours. It could be going towards something else.
Yeah.
And so it honestly is better to cut it out of your life, so that you don't have that drain going on. Because life is
Hmm.
short, it's like, is it really worth, keeping up with things that don't give you joy like that? It's just nine times out of 10, you are overthinking it anyway.
Oh, absolutely you are. Again, like we talked about this before in the last episode, but like you're not the center of other people's universes.
Not at all. Yeah, it takes so long to figure that out. It's ridiculous.
It really does. But yeah, you really do have to establish that, like the kind of like your limits with like certain interactions, certain people, certain transactions.
Yeah.
And like sometimes even your own art, you have to establish it's like I can't make stuff like this anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like for me, like freelance, I'm like, I've hit my limit. Here it is. I can't do this anymore. I have to set strong boundaries.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh my God, I cannot stress how important that has been.
I am so freaking happy for you. I have no
So
idea.
I'm so happy I didn't take on anything else. Like I had a project that was trying to get me, and I was just like, no, I can't do it. And
I'm
I was
so
like,
glad you didn't do that children's book. Oh my God.
oh, I can breathe. I can breathe because I said no. What is this life like? Yeah, so it's real nice to be able to do
Oh
that.
man. Oh, you're gonna have such a great weekend this weekend too, knowing that there's nothing hanging over your head. That's
I
amazing.
know. Oh yeah, I'm very excited about it. But yeah, it's so funny too because like I'm also realizing that my mom is learning these same lessons at, at 60 that I'm learning at 34. And it's just really interesting. Like at different stages of life, you sometimes like those lessons just crop up whenever they need to set boundaries with people and to like say to actually learn to say no to things and learn that you can't give yourself to every single thing all the time
Oh
because
yeah.
there's only so much of you to give out.
Totally.
So yeah, it's just it's a very tough thing to balance, but yeah, and I think especially us as artists too, because we tend to be kind of like more introverted and also like more like seeking kind of well, some of us at least seek validation because of like the nature of our craft and like knowing that we kind of like give it to other people and we want to make other people happy, and so it's really hard to say no, so for some of us for sure, and I'm like, oh, but you can like say no and like it's
Yeah.
okay and the world hasn't ended.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's powerful to say no, it's
It
like
is powerful.
because you're deciding, what you're willing to take on. And for me, I guess from the outside, it looks like where there's all these cool things happening. You're like, I want to say yes to all of them because I want to work on all of them because it's what I've always wanted to do. And
Mhm.
yes, that there is a power to that, especially if you've been craving that your whole life, to get to the pick of the, of the, I don't even know what word I'm trying to say, but to get to basically have to take your pick of all these awesome things. Yeah,
Yeah,
of course you want to say yes to them all, but there's actually power in saying no to awesome things too.
absolutely.
Um,
It really
so
is. And
and
like, yeah,
just choosing rest, choosing self-care, I think is a powerful thing to do. And just don't do this. It's not worth it. Like it's like what we said in that last episode. Like you're not gonna regret not working more when you're dying. Like you literally aren't.
exactly.
I don't
Yes.
understand.
It doesn't serve you. Like what I would regret is not making more art that I love to make. Like
Yeah.
rather than like working for like somebody else doing things that don't make me happy.
Yeah.
Like I'm not gonna regret the thing that doesn't make me that happy. Like it is totally fine if I didn't do more of that. Like, oh man, I should have really given my heart and soul to this company. I'm like, no, I'm going to establish my limits and know that I can take my breaks and know that I can leave at 6 and know that I can still do a good job and be able to have time to do things that I actually like really want to do. Like it's totally fine. But yeah, like like when I was younger, it was definitely something that was super hard for me. I thought that in order to be a valid person who can contribute to like my friends or like be there or like for my family or for anybody who was asking things of me, that I had to say yes to everything
Mm.
because I was afraid to be rejected later on if I said no to anything, or I was afraid to be thought of as a certain way, like, oh, I'm not going to ask them again. I was afraid to miss out
Hmm.
for saying no. And
Right.
so I would always say yes. And then later I'd be like, why am I so tired? Wow, what a novel concept. I'm just exhausted all the time. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Pikachu face. And then you realize you're like, oh, because I've signed up for way too much stuff. And anybody who knows me is probably going to laugh at that because they know that I am known for overloading myself with all of the things forever. And every single time I say, actually, I'm going to be free next week,
Yeah.
LOL. Everybody laughs at me and they're like, no, you're not. Like, that's stupid. Like, you're Lauren. Of course, you're not going to be free, you
Oh my
fool.
God. We're like the same person. Like that sounds like you're describing me. Hilarious. Oh my God.
It's so bad. It's so
So
bad.
bad.
What's
I
your
just
experience with that? Like, cause like it sounds like you had I mean, I'm assuming you had the trouble with saying no too.
I have trouble saying no to myself because I'm the one who invents all these things for myself to do. It's ridiculous. Like no one's telling me, "Hey Mia, do this, do that. You need to do more of this." Like it's just me saying I want to do all these things, and I don't know why. Like if we're going to like why where this came from, I don't know. I mean, I want to do them all. I
Yeah.
guess I have a delusion about time. It must be like I maybe I'm like the Mad Hatter and got into a quarrel with time and I'm just like convinced that there's more hours in a day than there are. But
Right.
I don't know. I can't tell you. But yeah, every month I'm like, I have like 10 things I want to accomplish. And at the end of the month, it's like I'll maybe get 5 of them done.
Yeah.
Or and it's like I've said in previous episodes that I've been doing this thing where I'm trying to do these postmortems where I have a list of the things I want to do and a list of the things I actually got done. And I try to compare them and be really like, see, this is realistic over here, but it keeps happening. Like I think it's just, I don't know, I'm just like overly ambitious, but and I've always been like this, but I don't know. It's not good. Because
Yeah.
actually I was listening to this sports psychologist talking about how if you plan way too much for yourself, it's like that whole shooting for the moon and you might land among the stars.
And among the stars.
Yeah, he totally trashed that quote. Because he was like saying it's still failure, and he wasn't trying to be harsh, but he's like saying that's basically teaching you that every time you're shooting for the moon and you're not actually hitting your target, it doesn't feel good. At the end of the day, you're associating that with failure, and that's what's happened to me, and that's why I'm so hard on myself. It's not because I'm not good at what I do. It's because I plan way too. I'm basically setting myself up for failure, and
Yeah.
I'm expecting myself to accomplish all this stuff. And if I don't, then I failed. And
Yeah.
so learning to say no is a form of self-care because
Mm-hmm.
you're letting yourself succeed. And I actually had to sort of relearn that over this pandemic where I've been taking freelance. I've been taking less freelance than I think I can do to make
Yeah.
sure I can actually do it. And that feels really good. And every one of those assignments I turned in a day early, and I felt even better that I did that. And then I can ramp it up and add more things to my plate. But I'm trying to do that because my enthusiasm is to say yes to everything.
Yeah.
But it's just I've just learned over time that I'm like I'm my own worst enemy when it comes to to doing things. So
Yeah. Like I would be putting things on my schedule as if I would rot for not having done anything.
right.
And so I would be like, I need to fill these things up so that I can be productive at all hours of the day, no
Yeah.
matter what. And then you're burnt out and you realize like I can't be productive at every hour of the day because it's not healthy. And actually rest is also productive, like we talked about before.
Yeah.
But it's also really hard to say no. And I think you brought up a really good point. Saying no to yourself, especially when you're an ambitious person like me and you, is really, really hard because we have this delusion that there's a way to get all of these things done, all of these 10 things in one day done. And we certainly have an idea of how that can get done, but we disregard completely how we will feel trying to get all of this stuff done. And
Yeah.
therefore, we feel exhausted or we feel bad about ourselves because we're like, oh, I wasn't able to get the stuff done. I wasn't able to, my limits have gotten so much worse. I must be so bad at this, blah, blah, blah. And then the self-loathing starts to kick in, which is never fun. And then for me, ADHD is just like, I have all this stuff and I'm not going to do it anyway because I get distracted too easily. And then I get upset at myself for not having done it. And then I get anxious because there's things that I still need to do. And it's just like the ruthless cycle of this mindset is so cruel and so mean. And even if you don't have ADHD, this can still easily happen where you just feel bad. And then you start to develop negative self-talk because you're not getting all this stuff done. So much better to say no to yourself and say, no, I don't have to do this today. I'm going to prioritize these things instead and set when these things are actually possible to get done and maybe undercommit just a little bit. So it's a little bit realistic because all we do all day is overpromise and underdeliver and it never feels good. It never feels good.
Bad idea. And actually, two people that have a day job and let's say you're so burnt out or you're a caretaker or you like basically your time is sucked away by something uncreative for most of the time. I think you like I've been there and that was like my life for years and you have no idea the pressure to like then push yourself to make something creative. And that's admirable if you can do it, but I would just not, but at the same time, like I guess this whole conversation applies to that as well, where it's like it's okay to say no to your own creative work, even if though that's the thing you want to do, if you just can't do it. It's not like the thing that got me through that period of my life is understanding that this is a season in my life. It will not last forever. Nothing lasts forever, not even good stuff, And so there will be a point where you will get to dedicate more time to your art if you really want it badly enough and you actively carve that time away, it will happen for you. Absolutely. So I guess it's just like there's a form of self-care also in even if you're not getting to do what you want, even though that sounds kind of convoluted, but actually for me that I think having to sit out my own art career, because that's what it felt like, made it easier to say no. Actually, now that I can do the things I want to do, it made it easier for me to say no to other things because I really value this time now that I get to make my own stuff. And so anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there too.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, saying no to freelance, being able to free myself up to actually do my personal work finally. Like I have said no to my personal work for that entire time because I knew I couldn't handle both at once.
Yeah.
And having backed away from it and coming back to it, it actually feels so much better now because I'm getting that kind of push to actually want to draw. And that feels so nice again to have. And I'm like, oh, I remember what this feels like, but I only got that push because I backed away. Otherwise, I would feel burnt out on my own personal work. And that's never where anybody wants to be because it's like denying a part of myself. But it really, like, I want to be able to do my personal work when I actually feel like doing my personal work rather than forcing myself to do personal work because then I just create things that I'm not happy with. Mm-hmm. So, it's like the saying no enables you to actually do your best work sometimes, I think. Yeah. And also saying no to things that probably won't serve you. For example, if you're doing a freelance job that's not paying enough, or if you're doing something for somebody else that's not paying at all, like you realize that you could be doing your own work and you could be building up your portfolio, or you could be, serving your own business or whatever you need to do. That can pay off much better dividends sometimes than those projects can. Just depends on what it is, obviously, play it by ear. Yeah. And it's not to say that freelance is bad. It's not to say that full-time work is bad at all. Obviously, we need to do all of these things to, get us paid and eat and, live. Yeah. But it's also just taking time for yourself as well to have balance in between all of those things. Make sure that you're prioritizing the proper things in your life. So, it's impossible to take on all of it all at once. You can't. Multitasking is not a thing. It's not a real thing.
Don't think it's a lie.
It's a lie. Multitasking is literally you're just doing a lot of tasks at different times really quickly, and you're not focusing your full attention on any of them. Don't do it. I do that all the time. Don't do it. It's not smart.
You can literally only do one thing at once. Literally, like you're saying, you're doing several things badly. That's all you're doing.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, Mia. I sure can listen to an audiobook and draw at the same time.
I find myself zoning out sometimes to parts. I'm like, oh shoot, I don't remember what just happened, and I have to go and rewind like so many times.
I do that too.
I'm a bad listener.
Yeah, inking for me is the best because I have I'm full like Zen mode when I'm inking, so I can just like actually key into whatever I'm listening to. But I don't know if is listening actually doing. I'm not sure. Anyway, but but yeah, just like try not to overload yourself with too many things, because that's just like it tortures your brain, and
Yeah.
like tries to force it to think about so many different things and hold all of this information.
Yeah.
We glorify this high level of productivity all the time, and I'm saying all this advice now, and I cannot deny that I feel really good when I am able to get a bunch of stuff done at once, and when I have had a super productive day. I mean, getting things done feels awesome. It feels great,
Yeah.
but you just can't do it all the time. That's all. And I'm still learning this lesson, and I'm getting better about it, but I'm still learning. And I know I have work to do. I'm aware of that. I know who I am as a person,
Yeah.
but the character growth is actually taking those lessons to heart and then applying it, and then feeling that satisfaction of when you said no to something that has been plaguing you for a long time, and you finally got rid of it, and you're like, oh, I can breathe. This is
Yeah.
really,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. And that's what's hard too, because I think being like an artist, that like a self-employed artist, if that's what you want to do, there's so many different hats you have to wear, and each one of those hats takes so much time to develop, and to so that it's all an oil, like a well-oiled machine. And ideally what you want is some passive streams of income that will just be making you income when there is a crisis, or just other forms of income, so you're not putting all your eggs in one basket like I did so many years ago. And that all takes time, and it's just like, just be patient with yourself. And I know the younger you are, I remember being in my 20s and being like very impatient about everything, but it's like, it's a marathon. We'll keep saying that. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Marathon.
It's okay if it takes time. It's okay if it takes you longer than someone else. Like none of that matters. So
Yeah. I'm ambitious now. I was so ambitious in my 20s. Oh my God. Like, I mean, my 20s was when I made that like 120-page illustrated book, because I could.
yeah.
And I really couldn't, but I did it, and mixed results. Sure, it went over really well. But I look back at it now, I'm like, I was like, what was I doing? Like, why did I do this to myself? Because I remember that every waking moment was spent working on this thing, and I was foregoing social life, and I was foregoing spending time with like people or doing other things or dedicating myself to my classes fully.
Yeah.
And it all turned out fine. Like I still did go to school, but like I just remember so much of that senior year spent working,
Mhm.
and just spent like pouring myself into this just because I wanted to prove myself, and I wanted to prove my dean wrong, that he said you should cut that to, make it 20 pages. And I'm like, 20? That's not nearly enough. Is that all you think I'm capable of? Like, mind you, he's a professional illustrator who's been doing this for years and years, so maybe he knows what he's talking about, but I didn't. So I did all of that work instead to prove myself. It's not it's not cute, guys. It's not cute, everybody. Like, it really isn't. Because I look back at that book and I'm like, I could have done a lot more with so much less, with so much less.
Yeah.
Not have to do everything. It is okay if you don't have to be like performing crazy miracles in order to be valid and in order to be a good illustrator, like, or a good artist, or a good anybody.
Yeah.
It is not necessary.
And you definitely don't want to set a precedent either, that that's now the expectation of you.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's actually like shooting yourself in the foot. Like if now people demand this of you, how are you going to keep this sustainable? So
Yeah.
definitely be like more strategic about your choices as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I might have touched on this in a previous episode, but even if for like there's a deadline or two that you have to take that is, or that is ridiculous, it's ridiculous on your health, and you get it done, it doesn't mean that then thereafter everything you do has to be performed at that pace,
Yeah,
especially if it's your own self-directed work. You can choose to set longer deadlines for yourself, and
absolutely.
take care of yourself. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the projects will come and go, and I completely understand having to take on that project with a crazy deadline, or having to take on something that's not really, serving you that well in terms of like your art, because you need the money. I
yeah.
totally get that. That's completely necessary for survival if you're a
Yeah.
freelance artist or independent or anybody really. And sometimes those opportunities are really good. They can be good for networking. They can be good for like future opportunities to do more work for that client. But it's about balancing. It's about being realistic of what you can actually deliver. Because what you don't want to catch yourself doing is lying to somebody and saying, I can totally do this. You can't do that, but I can totally do this. And like, maybe you can, maybe you'll suffer during it, but sometimes you really can't. And sometimes there's just not enough time. You can also, you have the power to also negotiate certain things. And you'll find that if you try, then maybe they'll be willing to work with you to meet you halfway. Negotiating is not a sign that you are incompetent. It's not a sign that you're not good enough. It just means that you actually know how to advocate for yourself and you know what your limits are. And if they can't meet that, then you try to work with it, but try first at the very least, because negotiating deadlines is something that I didn't even think about doing until I got a little bit older. And I was like, oh, it's actually possible to do that. And you can say, actually, I need 2 weeks to finish this. And usually they're like, fine, this is fine. And you realize that there's like other things where they made a buffer for themselves anyway. Sometimes they can't, and that's okay. But yeah, you have power. You need to recognize the power you have.
And they'll respect that you communicated with them and that you're being honest instead of you trying to do it and then doing a terrible job.
Exactly.
Obviously, you have to earn that respect in the sense that if you have made deadlines before, or if you have been, like someone that's easy to work with, they'll be more likely to give you that leeway. But it's always, I think you should always communicate as opposed to trying to bottle it in and make it happen if you really can't. So
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, like with Deck of Wonders, I had to ask for an extension because it was just so much work and I didn't realize how much work it was until I got in the thick of it. And I was like, actually, I think I might need to extend this deadline. And he was like, fine, like that's fine, we can work with it. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. Okay. And like I could breathe a little bit better because I knew that I didn't have to stress myself and I didn't have to pull all-nighters, because like now that I'm older and now that I'm, 10 years in my career, I'm realizing that all-nighters are just a thing that I cannot compromise on. I can't do them anymore. I cannot set myself up for staying up all night because I would just be destroyed. Like that would destroy my next 5 days. It's just, it's unhealthy. And I know this, I know it's the limit now. So if anything requires me to do an all-nighter, I'm like, oh, okay, I can't do this. Like, it's just an absolute limit. And I think establishing those absolute limits for yourself is really, really important. So find out what your boundaries are and examine that for yourself.
And research, like look into sleep, because it's actually like there's so many more scary articles coming out about how bad it is to miss even like a few hours of sleep. Like the difference between 6 hours and 8 hours is really scary actually. And I mean, I guess just consider like, is this worth doing this to my body? Like before you do it. And it shouldn't just be automatically something that you do for everything. But if it's a difference between like shortening your lifespan because you're not getting enough sleep, because that is a thing.
Yeah. Oh, and, absolutely.
Like if that's worth it to you, then go for it, but it's not worth it to me. Like I want to live longer.
Because like, yeah, there's all these jobs out there. There's all these like opportunities. There's all these things that are happening. There's only one of this. You only get one of these vehicles to move and do your art with. So you should probably take care of it.
Yeah.
Because if something happens to it, it's going to be a bit rough to make art. So I'm just saying.
Dude, they should have had like a self-care class in college where you learn like the stretches, like to take breaks, like what's that like a sedentary lifestyle does to you, like where you learn all of that. Like,
oh no, what? No, of course not, Mia. Wait, if we learn how to take care of themselves, then we can't be exploited by people. How dare you teach self-care in school? These are not exploitable. We can't not pay them enough money to work 11 hours a day. They know how to take care of themselves. What a thing to release into the wild.
Yeah, no, it's dangerous.
Dangerous. Yeah, no, like.
I'm sorry, I'm speaking out of turn.
I can't believe we even have the audacity to think this should be educated.
Hey, there is somebody that's angry listening to this and saying, how dare you make me think about my body?
How dare you make me think about my mental health?
Yeah.
My mental health and how I am as a person to not be exploited by other people. There's so many things that should have been taught in college. Oh my goodness. There's so much that like we just missed out on. And so we end up learning these lessons really late. And honestly, as much as we say about social media and the internet, and it can be really dangerous, it's also really educational because, I mean, we're on here saying this information, reading all the stuff that's been going around, these articles, these studies around sleep, these mental health considerations, all this stuff. Like we only know about it because we're so connected now and everybody's talking about it. So we get to really be a part of this conversation about, all these things that we have signed up for, all these old things that we have believed in. Some of them are just false. and some of them are just bad for us, and we shouldn't have to subscribe to this anymore. And so it's all these old traditions that are slowly being broken because they have been unhealthy and we've been following them. But it's really also hard because we have grown up with this mindset that everything is supposed to work a certain way, that you're supposed to commit a certain amount of yourself to something. It's really hard to get yourself to unlearn all of those behaviors and unlearn all those patterns. So don't feel bad if you find yourself repeating these gestures over and over again, because it takes time to dismantle them.
Yeah.
Like the only thing that is really, really important, well, not the only thing, but one of the biggest things to be aware of is just the awareness that it's happening and that you're doing it again. Because if you're aware, you can examine yourself and then slowly start to break it apart.
Yeah.
And then slowly you get to a point where you actually know when to say no and know when to say yes. And you have that balance in your life. Yeah.
Yeah. Right on.
Right on. All right. All right. All right.
So funny, I never say that, but that just came out. I was like, that's all I can say. That was like so perfect. I couldn't add anything to that.
That was really cute, Mia. Yeah. Oh man, this is gonna seem really unrelated, but it's so funny because as I was talking, I had realized that the feeling of like overloading myself with tasks, or that kind of stress and anxiety that I would always put on myself, it related a lot to this. So short story, I'm just gonna keep it short. There was my smoke detector was beeping because I'm like, oh, low battery, gotta replace it. So I replaced the battery. It's still beeping. I'm like, why is it still beeping? I go all around the house. I'm looking at all my other 5 detectors and I'm like, maybe I have to replace all the batteries. Replacing all the batteries, everything is still beeping. Like, okay, this device are changed. Maybe I have to replace the device. Everything's still beeping. What's going on? That beep, that constant background noise when I'm sleeping, when I am in my living room, when I'm in the office, I can hear it downstairs. It's just in the back of my head, plaguing me, beeping. And it was just like, I don't know where this is coming from, but I hate it so much. And like, it really triggered my anxiety, like really, really bad. Like I couldn't actually like rest properly. I couldn't like, I would find myself in the middle of the day, just like trying to struggle to like, just like breathe, just breathe. It's just like this background noise that's like constant and I can't control it and I don't know what's happening.
Right.
And I was like going to call the fire department and everything. I didn't do it, but I was going to. I was like, maybe it's like faulty wiring, maybe something bad. But then I remember that security people came to my house and they took out my old smoke detector and put in a new one. And I'm like, what if they actually didn't take it away? And I found it in my closet.
Oh my God.
They didn't take the batteries out. And so they just left it there. They didn't tell me where they put it. They just left it in there. And it was so loud that it resonated throughout the house, even though it was backed away. But long story short, that beeping in the background feels eerily reminiscent to how it feels when I have all of these things piled up and I have no way to finish them. And because I have no way to finish them, I feel this anxiety of something that is out of my control. And it makes me unable to rest. It makes me unable to really center myself. It makes me unable to just focus. And it's like that constant beeping. And so I need to eliminate all the beeps in my life so that this doesn't happen to me. And I'm still working on that because like, even though that beep is silenced, there's still a beep in the back of my head. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us for this. I hope you got something out of it. And I hope you learn the power to say no to the things that you can say no to. And please, please take care of yourself because we're trying to do that too. Bye, everybody.